The Raiders brand is huge. It is historical. The fan base is wildly popular, very famous, have their antics, and it's great. They have a beautiful new stadium in Las Vegas, one of my favorites personally. I am a logistics nerd, so being able to walk across a pedestrian bridge into the stadium and walk out and get an Uber very quickly, I love it. Wonderful experience there at Allegiant in Las Vegas. All that aside, what have the Raiders done that would give you any confidence that they are all of a sudden now moving off of Derek Carr, somehow going to get this right? Well, let's see. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at their first-round picks, right? A good team that has first-round picks should have some of them in the last 3 years still on the roster, right? Clelin Ferrell, Josh Jacobs, fifth-year option decline. Jonathan Abram, cut. Damon Arnett, cut. Henry Ruggs, cut. Alex Leatherwood, cut. All right, so no help from the draft. So it should go well if they want to draft a player to replace Derek Carr. Well, Josh McDaniels, he has a great resume of drafting quarterbacks, right? Who was that guy that he took? Tim Tebow. That inspires confidence. Josh McDaniels himself, what in his resume would make you think that he's capable of turning this around? Well, if he was the offensive coordinator with Tom Brady as the quarterback, I'd feel great. Even if Tom Brady does come to the Raiders, which if I put my tinfoil hat on, maybe that's what they're up to here. We don't know if Tom Brady's going to retire. I certainly think he is. But even if Tom Brady was to come here, Josh McDaniels isn't the offensive coordinator. He's the head coach. So he still has to fix everything else. Like perhaps the defense that's the worst in the league and has the least amount of sacks out of any defense in the league. Maybe that has something to do with all these halftime leads that they blew. Now, look, I am not going to absolve Derek Carr for what happened with the Raiders this season. And by all accounts, they are very disappointing. This entire division has been mostly disappointing. I mean, the Chargers are now clinching the playoffs, so they are progressing. Thank God. Like with a young emerging star quarterback, they have now gotten everybody healthy. The defense is playing well with the defensive head coach, and they're taking a step up. And of course, the Chiefs are what the Chiefs always are. Broncos disaster. We'll get to them in a moment. But the Raiders are really disappointing. You brought Devontae Adams here. You have stars on defense. You have some stars on the offensive side of the ball. You have a steady quarterback in Derek Carr. You were in the playoffs last year. What happened? How did it all fall apart? Am I to believe that this is all Derek Carr's fault? The guy that has held this organization together through everything. I don't have time today. It would bore you for me to list the endless book of things that have happened since he's been there in his tenure with the Raiders. We give Baker Mayfield this everlasting pass for all the coaches that he has had to deal with, all the turmoil that he went through in Cleveland. Derek Carr's had 6 head coaches. Every year he has to reset into something new. I'm not going to give him a pass entirely on how he's played this year. He hasn't been great. It's been disappointing. I get it. But what am I supposed to believe here, Raiders? You're just punting on the rest of the season. I get it. It's going to be very difficult for you to win these last 2 games and make the playoffs. It's virtually impossible. But you're saying it is impossible. We don't care. We just want to move off of Derek Carr. And it's because we want to see the young players. We want to see what they can do. Is it that? Is it that, Raiders? Or is it that you owe him $33 million next season if he happens to get hurt in these last 2 games? I'm going to guess it's the $33 million. I'm going to guess it's that. If you want to move off of Derek Carr, fine. Maybe he's not good enough to get you over the edge. But here's what I caution the Raiders, because I have no faith that they're going to do the right thing and turn this around. Take a look at the Washington Commanders. I'm not the biggest fan of Kirk Cousins. I don't think Kirk Cousins is great. He's certainly having a nice season this season. He's certainly proving a lot of doubters wrong this season. He's having a nice year. Nobody really knows how this is going to go for the Vikings, but we know Kirk Cousins is a franchise quarterback. How things look when you leave does matter. How things go when you leave a place does matter if you're the guy. They've had 11 starting quarterbacks since Kirk Cousins has left. For all that, we're just going to keep franchise tagging him. We don't want to give him a long-term deal. Cool. Well, now you're back to Carson Wentz again as you're trying to make the playoffs after you are moving off of Taylor Heineke. So be careful what you wish for. When you want to jump on the quarterback carousel, you better have a plan. So Russell Wilson spoke to the media yesterday. Obviously, Nathaniel Hackett was fired, which was mostly expected. It was a disaster for the Denver Broncos this season, considering the expectations, considering the trade, everything that they had the year before that was carried over, how the defenses played. It's been a dumpster fire. And Russ is going to say the right thing because that's what Russ does. And that's expected. But there's no two ways about this. Russell Wilson got Nathaniel Hackett fired. He did. His play got Nathaniel Hackett fired. So where do the Broncos go from here? Do they hire an experienced head coach? Do they bring in another young offensive upstart to try and fix Russell Wilson? I prefer that they bring in someone with experience because everything that's happened with the Broncos has been a disaster from top to bottom. I don't think it's a good idea to have somebody learning how to be a head coach on top of everything else that they're going to be responsible for in Denver. But to me, more than anything, this is on Russell Wilson. It's time for Russell Wilson to step up to the accountability plate. We've heard time and time again from Seattle, from former teammates, from Shannon Sharp on Undisputed a few days ago, from Andrew Whitworth saying he heard it, other former players, that Russ is really out of touch with what his role, not just with the Broncos is, but in the NFL. Russell's a star because of what he's done on the football field. And it's now morphed into a consistent drumbeat of he's not really aware of what he's doing and how his teammates are receiving him. We're in Hollywood. This happens all the time. It was one of my biggest fears, actually, when I moved to Los Angeles. I was terrified of being labeled as a diva. I didn't want to be the person that, people would say that she doesn't treat people well and, doesn't take care of the people around her. I didn't want to be that person because that's not who I am. But it's very easy to fall into a space where you're just in your own world, in your own bubble. You have your own things going on. People do this when they're not in Hollywood. It's understandable. But when someone tells you, hey, you gotta reel it back a little bit because not only are you doing this, you're not performing well. There's a thing called flops in the movie business, superstars. You have a couple of these bad movies, you do a couple of these bad scripts, all of a sudden, are you really an A-lister? Are you really as good as we thought you were? Are you deserving of all these Maybelline commercials and things, red carpet appearances, talk shows? People start to question that. Whether it's fair or not, fares are Ferris wheels and fried Oreos. It's not fair. But it is what it is. So if you're going to live in this celebrity space, which at this point I feel Russ is in, you need to reel it back because what's made you this star is your performance on the football field. And here's what's happening now. Because Nathaniel Hackett's been fired, because the disaster that was the Denver Broncos happened, however much pressure, however much criticism, however many questions there are about what the Broncos are going to do with Russell Wilson and what's going to happen with his career, however bad that is now, if this continues on to next year, it's like your fifth flop. And we're going to start re-examining everything else that Russ has done in his career. And all those quotes from former teammates in Seattle and talks about how unaware he is that people are spiteful of his private office in the building and all of his parking spots. Little things matter when you're losing. I just think if this is going to work, it's all on Russell Wilson. That's not fair, but that's what happens when you trade 5 draft picks and pay someone a 5-year, $245 million contract. There's an exchange here. He's not volunteering. You're getting compensated, and they gave up a lot. They've mortgaged the entire future of the organization on Russell Wilson. So there's really no more space for any of the separation that has happened this year between Russ and the teammates, Russ and the team, Russ's image and brands and all that stuff. All that's got to be shelved. We talk about this all the time with young quarterbacks. Don't get too consumed in getting a brand. Your brands will build on its own, and mostly through winning and great play. And it will last because you're really good and people like to watch you play football. So then they will buy things that you sell and then they will go to your appearances. All of that comes in time. I'm all for people making money. I'm interested in making money for what I do for a living. I certainly don't discourage anyone else to do that. But you also have to be aware of what that brand looks like when you're losing and costing other people jobs and other people the opportunity to make money. Nathaniel Hackett deserves his share of the blame in this situation, and I don't think it was the wrong choice to fire him. But next year, it's going to be all on Russell Wilson, and he's actually going to have to be all in.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.